My husband abandoned me in a small Italian village following a heated argument, certain I would come back. But I didn't. Now he's desperately trying to locate me. Let's see how she manages, Ethan remarked with a smirk, shutting the car door forcefully. The red glow of our rental's taillights vanished around the winding street, leaving behind only dust and the fading laughter of his companions. I stood motionless, my sentence left unfinished. What had begun as a minor dispute outside a cozy cafe paled in comparison to his shocking decision. "He'll return," I whispered to myself, earning puzzled looks from patrons at nearby tables. This is just another tactic to intimidate me. As time passed, the tightness in my chest grew. Night fell over the unfamiliar town, its name a mystery to me. I never expected Ethan to drink so heavily at lunch despite my protests. His friends, college buddies celebrating their yearly reunion, which I had reluctantly joined, encouraged his behavior. When I suggested returning to the hotel, Leo sneered, "She's always dictating your moves," before ordering another drink. Ethan followed me outside, his words slurred but his fury unmistakable. Years of suppressed frustration exploded into a bitter argument. "Your purse has your passport, doesn't it?" he spat before climbing into the driver's seat. "Then you'll manage. You're always so clever telling me what to do." As darkness fully settled, the gravity of my situation became clear. The picturesque Italian village now felt ominous. A quick inventory revealed I had only €80, hardly enough for lodging, let alone a journey home. Ethan had my credit cards in his possession, something he'd insisted on for convenience. With my small bag nearly empty, I found a modest room above a bakery, its sparse furnishings offering little comfort. The elderly landlady spoke no English but gave my arm a reassuring pat. "He's gone," I murmured, checking my phone. 27 missed calls from Ethan, all ignored. Messages flooded in, but I paid no attention. I even attempted to contact Leo and the others, only to discover I'd been blocked. A cold realization struck. This was no impulsive act. It was a deliberate humiliation. My sleep was restless, interrupted by frantic phone checks and surges of panic. By morning, I hoped the ordeal would be over. Ethan would reappear with apologies, blaming his actions on alcohol and calling it a prank. I'd be livid but relieved to return to our polished life in Boston, where he was a respected architect and I was the dutiful wife who'd sacrificed her career to support his. But he never returned. On the second day, I carefully budgeted my money, buying only a sandwich as I searched the town for any trace of our group. By nightfall, I learned they'd departed for Florence without me. On the third day, a compassionate cafe owner, noticing my distress, offered me coffee and directions to the police station. The officer listened with the tired demeanour of someone accustomed to stranded travellers, but the language barrier left me with little more than a filed report and a sympathetic nod. That afternoon, I made the most difficult choice of my life. Standing before a pawn shop, I removed my wedding ring, a 2-carat diamond Ethan had gifted me on our 5th anniversary, replacing our original simple band. The pawnbroker offered a fraction of its value, but it was enough for my next move. "America? Cool family," he suggested, counting out euros. I nodded absently, but another plan was forming. Family meant explanations. My mother's inevitable, "I warned you," about Ethan's temper and facing friends who'd seen the fractures I'd tried to conceal. At the bus station, I gazed at the departure board, its destinations beckoning like new opportunities. An overnight bus to Rome connected to ferries and routes Ethan would never consider. My finger hovered over my father's contact. One call would secure a flight home, back to a life of diminishing myself to accommodate Ethan's demands. "Why make things complicated?" he'd once said when I mentioned reviving my design career. "We don't need the income, and I need you focused on our life." At the time, I'd brushed it off. Now, in that shabby station, I recognized it for what it was. Another barrier in the cage he'd constructed around me. "Destination?" asked the ticket agent, an older woman with gentle eyes who'd observed my hesitation. "Greece," I replied, the word tasting like liberation. "The tiniest coastal village you can send me to." 14 hours later, I staggered off the final bus, stiff and weary. The village, its name unknown to me, was a vision of whitewashed houses, salty breezes, and olive groves. My phone died between borders. My stomach ached with hunger, and the weight of my decisions pressed heavily upon me. 3 days of emotional turmoil left me drained, oscillating between anger, fear, and an unexpected glimmer of relief. With my remaining euros, I secured the cheapest room for 2 nights. Beyond that, I had no strategy, no contacts, and only rudimentary Greek phrases. But as I watched the sunset gild the Aegean waves in gold and pink, I felt a serenity I hadn't experienced in years. Ethan had intended to teach me a lesson about dependence. Instead, he'd unwittingly granted me freedom. The months following Ethan's departure unfolded like the pages of a book I never knew I was meant to write. As autumn painted the olive groves in golden hues, I found myself settling deeper into the rhythms of village life. Daphne and Giannis, now more than mentors, became the family I hadn't realized I needed. The first harvest festival. When October arrived, the village prepared for its annual olive harvest festival. The air buzzed with excitement as everyone contributed to the preparations. "You will help with the oil tasting," Daphne announced one morning, handing me a crisp white apron embroidered with our farm's name. The weight of this responsibility settled on me. I was no longer just a visitor, but part of something meaningful. The festival day dawned bright and clear. Villagers and tourists alike crowded around our stall, eager to sample this year's yield. To my surprise, many recognized me now. "Ah, the American who makes the best olive soap," old man Petros called out, his eyes twinkling. Zoe, my market stall neighbor, nudged me playfully. "You're becoming famous, Claire. Soon they'll write songs about you." A letter from the past. One rainy afternoon, while organizing the farm's records, I discovered a stack of yellowed letters in an old chest. Daphne's hands trembled when she saw them. "My Irene," she whispered, tracing the Australian postmarks. Together we began composing a reply to her daughter after 15 years of silence. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard as Daphne dictated in broken English, her voice thick with emotion. "Tell her, I keep her room ready, and now, I have another daughter too." The letter that arrived 3 weeks later brought both tears and joy. Irene included photos of her children and an invitation to visit. That night, as we celebrated with Giannis's homemade wine, I realized how deeply our lives had become intertwined. The storm that changed everything. Winter brought fierce storms to our coastal village. One particularly violent night, as wind howled through the olive groves, we heard a terrible cracking sound. Rushing outside with lanterns, we found 3 of our oldest trees split by lightning. Giannis fell to his knees in the mud, his weathered hands touching the charred bark reverently. "These trees, my grandfather planted them," he said, voice breaking. In that moment, I understood what the grove truly meant to them. Not just a livelihood, but a living connection to generations past. The next morning, I surprised myself by announcing, "I'll help you replant." Not just 3 trees, but a whole new section of the grove. Daphne's eyes shone as Giannis clasped my shoulder. "Then we'll call it Claire's Grove," he declared. An unexpected visitor. Spring arrived with a surprise. One market day, a familiar Boston accent cut through the chatter. "Claire, is that really you?" I turned to find Sarah, my old college roommate, staring at me open-mouthed. Her designer sunglasses couldn't hide her shock at seeing me in work boots, demonstrating olive oil varieties to a group of German tourists. Over cups of strong Greek coffee, I shared my story. Sarah listened, then shook her head in amazement. "Everyone in Boston thinks you're in some luxury rehab in Switzerland. Ethan's been telling people you needed time to recover." She leaned closer. "Between us? His firm's struggling since you left. Turns out you were the one holding all those client relationships together." As Sarah departed with promises to keep my secret and a case of our finest oil, I realized I felt no bitterness, only gratitude for the life I'd found. The future takes root. Now, as I walk through Claire's Grove watching the new saplings grow strong, I sometimes marvel at the journey that brought me here. The woman Ethan abandoned in Italy seems like a stranger to me now. Daphne and Giannis are teaching me the old ways, how to read the weather and the flight of birds, how to sing to the trees as we harvest. Next month, Irene and her family are visiting for the first time in 20 years. And yesterday, as we bottled our newest batch of oil, Giannis made an announcement. "When the time comes, this land will belong to both my daughters." The olive trees whisper in the breeze as I write these words. Their gnarled trunks have weathered countless storms, yet they endure, just like the human heart. Ethan thought he was punishing me when he drove away that night. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift, the chance to discover who I was meant to be. The summer heat hung heavy over the groves when the letter from Athens arrived. I nearly dropped the basket of fresh-picked olives when Daphne called me inside, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. "Official papers," she said, pushing her reading glasses up her nose. "About the land." The government's claim. The crisp documents bore intimidating stamps and legal jargon, but the meaning became clear. The government was claiming eminent domain over part of our western grove for a new coastal road. Giannis turned ashen reading the compensation offer. "This would take the oldest trees," he whispered, "the ones that survived the German occupation." That night, we sat around the kitchen table strategizing. My hands, now calloused from farm work, traced maps while my mind, the same one that once designed Boston penthouses, searched for solutions. "There's a conservation law," I remembered suddenly, "for historical agricultural lands. My old firm worked on a similar case in Tuscany." Return of the designer. For the first time in years, I opened my professional portfolio. Dusting off my design skills, I created presentations showing how the road could be rerouted without touching our trees. The village council, initially skeptical of the American newcomer, gradually warmed to my ideas. "You speak for us at the hearing," old man Andreas insisted, surprising everyone. "You understand both worlds." In Athens, standing before officials in my simple dress and work-worn sandals, I felt a strange power. Not the hollow influence of Ethan's social circles, but the weight of real purpose. When I finished speaking, even the stone-faced bureaucrats applauded. Irene's homecoming. The victory celebration coincided with Irene's long-awaited visit. When the taxi pulled up, Daphne froze. The daughter she hadn't seen in decades now stood before her with a husband and 2 teenagers. "You must be Claire," Irene said, pulling me into an embrace. "Mama's letters talk about nothing else." As we walked through the groves together, Irene confessed she'd been afraid to return, ashamed of abandoning her parents' traditions. "But seeing what you've built here, it makes me wonder what parts of myself I've abandoned too." The Boston Echo. News of my Athens victories somehow reached American travel magazines. "From society wife to Olive Grove savior," the headlines read. The publicity brought unexpected benefits. Our olive oil orders tripled, and a prestigious culinary school invited me to teach a course on Mediterranean flavors. Then came the email from my old mentor. "Ethan's firm lost the Wellington project. He's been asking about you." I deleted it without reply, but that night I dreamed of Boston's cold streets. Waking to the scent of orange blossoms outside my window, I realized with startling clarity, I had no unfinished business there. A new generation. The greatest surprise came during harvest season. Little Katerina, Irene's 15-year-old, begged to learn the old ways. Watching Giannis teach her to judge olive ripeness, just as he'd taught me, something miraculous happened. "You'll take over the grove one day," he told us both at dinner, the old and new together. Daphne squeezed my hand under the table. No words were needed. The trees we'd saved, the traditions we'd preserved, the family we'd built. These roots now ran deeper than anyone could sever. Ethan's abandonment had been the beginning, not the end. And as the first autumn rains began to fall, I understood at last. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about romance, but about finding where you truly belong. If you enjoyed this story and felt the emotions behind it, don't forget to give it a like, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences and heartfelt stories. Your support means the world, and it helps us bring more content like this to you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.